our main topic here, we will talk about the seafarers, maintaining the well-being of the seafarers, how to maintain a proper, decent, social, psychological life for the seafarers on board, and the role of the industry, the role of the education, even the role of the government to maintain such environment for the seafarers, and how to raise the awareness regarding the seafarers in order to maintain their current situation and in order to plan their future among the technological challenges and the digitalization which is changing the shape of the world and the shape of the maritime industry. I just moved to United Arab Emirates recently. My headquarters is in Alexandria in Egypt, the Arab Academy, and we had initiated our branch there. I've been there for the past 3 years, and we are working in a very good contact with the government, with the Ministry of Education, with the Ministry of Energy, with the Maritime Department there, and I think they're taking a good care about this issue and to support the blue labor, the blue workers, the seafarers throughout their career, and jointly we are trying to do a better future for them in support to the blue economy, of course, which is one of the essentials and one of the basics of the economy worldwide. So we will start our discussions here regarding this matter, which is addressed to the human element. How are we going to take care of the seafarers? And there is a point I will raise at the end of the session. Let's postpone it to the end of our discussions. Is it properly? We are talking about the autonomous ship, about the smart ports. We are talking about the blockchain platforms. We are talking about totally different new shape of the technology. Is it appropriate to call it seafarer, or shall we switch this term and we select something like a maritime professional in order to separate between the role of the seafarer and the maritime professional, which is, we are expecting much more out of him. We're expecting a huge adaptation to the future of the industry, so I think we might think about it, and I'll leave this word for further discussions at the end of this session. So let me start by David. David, the head of curriculum in the Lloyd's Maritime Academy. David, today we are talking about the human element and how crucial issue is to take care of the human element, the backbone of our industry, the driver of the industry, and the one who will plan the future industry. So what can we do in order to take care about his mental status and his physical fatigue?
Thank you. We have to remember that our people at sea are not only working in that environment, but also living in that environment. We need to provide them not only with the mental and physical support to do their jobs, but also the mental and physical support to live their lives partially at sea. And while we have made steps forward in terms of access to the internet, the provision of more suitable PPE for female seafarers, and other things around diet and the amount of time that seafarers could spend on board, there is still a lot more that we can do in terms of supporting them and their lives. And that can be a number of different aspects. It can be the facilities that we're giving them on board. It can be the support systems that we're giving them, whether that is on board or virtually, both in terms of supporting their mental and their physical well-being.
Yeah. So let me move to Peter, Vice President for Supply Chain in Thome Group. Regarding the pre-joining assessment for the seafarer, apart from the technical one, I'm talking about, let's say, the psychometric one or the psychological measurement tools. So how do you see the pre-joining online assessment and the reality? How do you see that, considering that this seafarer has been working on board the ship under might be a continuous stress and most often under challenging conditions?
Yeah, you might say that ship managers or owners are only financially driven, and have in their mind how to limit P&I risks. But I think in this time and age, it goes much further. That's why we are investing and promoting a much enlarged scope for the pre-joining tests. it's quite interesting when you look at what, for example, are the most challenging health effects that they have. It's toothache and teeth problems, right? But if you look at your list there, it's not even in there. So the other thing is probably that you would have to say it's also to protect the seafarers, where we at this time and age are not even able to say whether, in a case of an emergency, we can get them off board or can have proper medical care for them. Yeah. So I think it is absolutely opportune and necessary to extend the scope. And knowing our industry as well, it will not go down easily because a lot of stakeholders may not do that without being forced to it. So this is why I think it is probably not a bad idea to discuss what is the minimum levels that would be more reasonable. To cite a maximum horrible scenario, I spoke to a ship owner of tugs and pilot craft in Singapore, and he had a number of seafarers on board of a pilot boat for more than 24 months without being able to get off, you know, and that is not human in any given shape or form. So I think a pre-medical will help also to discover pre-medical conditions for the best interest of that person to be part of our community.
Yeah, because this has always been a question to me. We do like a psychometric test to the students before joining the cadetship. We do many screenings for them, but some of them might cause problems on board the vessel later on. So I always ask my question, the same question. How efficient is this? Because it's testing you under very normal situations, while on board the ship you will get into not common situations, especially for a newly joining a cadet or something. So that's why maybe I used to think about this. I thought about having such assessments in simulators, or maybe after developing a VR solution. So in order to get the candidates as much as we can into the real situation that we are expecting from. Maybe Dr. Konstantinos, of course, he's the general manager of Epsilon Hellas Ship Management. What do you think about maritime industry nowadays? And do you think it is that attractive for young men and women?
Can I just say a few things about this mental?
Please.
Just
I know you are a ship management company, and definitely you have a lot to add.
Just one small reference to that. I think the problem has to do with the ill-defined nature of what mental health is. We haven't properly defined what it is, and even more so, we haven't defined what mental health in shipping is. And we have the threat looming ahead that we may marginalize and stigmatize people for all the wrong reasons. So it's a very sensitive issue. Yeah. Just a small reference. I don't want to extend all that. But when it comes to the attractiveness of the industry and the future scenario about the attractiveness, and in order to connect the discussion, the concluding statements by the previous panelists, I think we have a major threat ahead, and it has to do with the attractiveness of the industry in the years to come among the younger generations, because the temptations are getting bigger and bigger all the time. And I don't think we have prepared well ahead for the future. Please allow me to wear my academic hat on and say something from international trade literature, which is the basis of shipping. The single most important factor for a country to attract foreign direct investment, and attracting foreign direct investment means more seats of employment, more wealth ashore, is the size of the middle class. And what we see nowadays in the major labor supplying countries of the world for shipping purposes, such as the Philippines, China, India, we see an exponential, unprecedented rise of the middle class. I'm sure people from those countries can easily convince the rest of us that, yes, they witness unprecedented levels of growth of the size of the middle class, which leaves us with a certain question. Will those people who currently man our vessels at a huge extent, the vast majority of our seafarers come from those countries, will they still be not able but willing to join a vessel? Or they will find alternative opportunities ashore, because multinational companies will build up factories, will create attractive jobs ashore, increasing wealth, increasing innovation rates, and Why should I join a vessel at sea and spend my life at sea where I can find alternative, equally meaningful and equally rewarding opportunities ashore? So I think that's the major threat that we are facing as an industry. I think collectively speaking, our community of practitioners has demonstrated its ability to respond to challenges, whether this is the pandemic or the war in Ukraine. I don't have any concern about this ability of ours, but this is something that moves beyond us. It has nothing to do with us as a shipping community. We cannot do anything about it. We cannot prevent it from happening. It is happening as we speak, and it will keep happening for the years to come. And I don't think we are prepared well enough to address the ramifications stemming from this exponential growth of the middle class in traditional labor supplying countries. That's my major concern with regards to the attractiveness of the seafaring profession.
Maybe I can ask the same question to Captain Sudhir, the senior surveyor in the Standard Club. Is the industry, the maritime industry, is attractive for the young men and women? Are we seeking men and women to get into our maritime industry, or do we need specific qualifications, specific segments, in order to get them enrolled on boards, in order to be able to maintain the future of the shipping and to plan it properly? So now I'm talking about a certain segment of our intended intake. So do you think that we can achieve so? Are we achieving so now? And what can we do to achieve it, if not?
Yeah, it's a very, very good question. I mean, I think to start with, I think what we need to really go into is to the mind of the seafarer and try and understand what is it that drives him or her to go out to sea in the first place. Mm-hmm. And I think that is what I think we need to think of, you know, as the society, you can say, as ships are getting more evolved technologically. The thing is, how do you attract that critical mass of seafarers to come on board? And it's a you know, very interesting question. As Doctor just mentioned here, the labor markets, for example, where the traditional supplies were coming in from, are now going into the middle class. And where is that attractiveness to bring them onto the ships? So then comes the question of digitalization, comes about the technology, about the future of shipping. So maybe that is where we need to start thinking. We need to maybe start looking at seafarers, looking at the profession, one as a profession, as a career, as a path to get into shipping, so that it can be used as a potential to move, you know, along with your career on land. And that should be not just for the developed parts of the world. Even for the developing parts of the world, the seafarer should have that motivation to get him onto the vessel. I think that would be very critical, and I think that's something that we need to think of as an industry. Of how do we get them that motivation to come on board the ships? And I think, yes, as things are changing on the ships, as technology is advancing, I think it would be quite an exciting phase for a younger you know, seafarer today who's coming out to sea to come into this, you know, world of shipping, which is changing from the traditional concepts of shipping that we always consider. It's going to move, you know, maybe akin to the airline industry in years to come. And I think that is quite an exciting sort of a direction to give them, to probably push them and to fulfill the supply chain. And ultimately, we have to be seafarer focused. We have to think of the individual and what he gets out of it rather than what we get out of it. Because yes, we get everything in this room, for example, is come on a ship at some point. But we need to start thinking about what that key worker, that seafarer, actually has as an attractive you know, proposition for him to join a ship.
Yeah. So continuing the same topic, just thoughts, Mr. Valentinos, Steliou, Mintra, the innovation director. Sorry, I think I'm not good in pronouncing Greek language. But,
actually, you were right.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, so in order to attract this new caliber in order to target such caliber. I want to attract someone who was intending to go to the School of Law or School of Medicine to come to the shipping industry. Do you think that the shipping industry needs rebranding, or are we good with the current branding?
Not only it needs rebranding, this rebranding should be part of a bigger spectrum of knowledge and awareness of what the profession is, what it entails. Everybody knows a story from somebody. And this awareness should also include the education perspective, the broadness of the activities, the responsibilities that we've heard from the previous panel before, the vastness of the job scope.
Exactly. So I think this is the plan that we have to do in order to get what we are aiming at. Mr. Domenico.
Yes, correct.
Yes, Domenico.
Yes.
Yeah, the Chief Executive Officer of MarTrust. Definitely, we are living in a high technology era, and definitely the pandemic had pushed the technology forward, the communication, the social media. Yeah. It triggered many applications during the pandemic. So let's say in this era, what is the proper approach for the current generation to provide the virtual social life on board? Do you see that there is a good potential for integrating the social media on board the ship?
First of all, yes, because we do need the Wi-Fi band. This is for sure. And once we have a proper coverage of the Wi-Fi band all over the shipping industry, which seems still is a little bit of problem, I think this is possible. What we are looking now, especially during the pandemic, that has obliged many seafarers to be stranded, and many of them in the rooms of the ship, was very difficult for them to communicate, and there was a lot of financial distress. I work for a company providing financial services for the shipping companies, and especially for the seafarer. And for those seafarers, we've been talking to them, and not being able to communicate, not to be able to transfer their funds back home because of the habit of receiving cash, going into port, and transferring cash. That was a very complex issue for them. So what we've been working on is, and that was the origin of our product, is something that we call crew welfare technology. Yeah. So making sure that with the same tool, the seafarer can both communicate with their family, they can express their needs, and they can also transfer money back home. And this is coming up in the industry. I remember not long ago seeing an app, and looking very much like Facebook, where people were communicating with their family, and one of the family members was asking, "Can you please send me $1,000?" And automatically the app was saying, the bot was saying, "Would you like to send $1,000 to your wife?" And you just have to push the button and doing that. Now, I don't know how long this is going to happen, to take place, but definitely we are going into this direction.
Yes. Yeah. And I think this is the social media and the financial integration with the seafarer on board. Yeah. So that will take us back to Valentinos again. How do you see the future of qualifying and certifying the personnel in terms of training, extra curriculums, and certification as well?
We see digitalization as the biggest change in our industry, and it is. However, digitalization is just the driver behind the new landscape that our seafarers will be facing, the new working conditions that they will be facing. Automation, artificial intelligence, the great data exchange that's today, and the connectivity requires from our seafarers to be skilled beyond the technical, the traditional technical skills that they were before. Today they are being required, and I'm saying today because I feel that digitalization is today, is not in the future. They are being required to have strong soft skills, healthy cognitive abilities, new skills based on new roles, and even knowledge that wasn't necessary before. For example, cyber-safe practices. They didn't have to know this before. And this is where the industry needs to invest in robust training and most of all different training. We don't just need more training, we need different training and different training methods. Learning and development providers are playing a huge role here into utilizing the technology and bringing the knowledge transfer methods to our seafarers. And we see this today. We see, especially the last 2 years, we see that virtual training has started to grow, has been developed and offered to our seafarers in combination with long-awaited scenario-based training that the seafarer doesn't have to be in front of a tutor virtually or physically anymore. We've seen during the last 2 years that our seafarers need to have access to training in remote locations when travel restrictions are in place. And we saw immediately offline training solutions being on the forefront. So this is the positive side of things. If I were to go back on qualifying, and we talked about assessments before, on qualifying seafarers and not just on technical skills. Today there is a plethora of assessments, tests, psychometric tests in our industry, personality tests, which validate the seafarer's ability to be recruited, or they evaluate if it's going to be recruited or even promoted. This shows that our industry safeguards the working environment. Now we go a step further. We are searching for complete solutions where you assess the seafarer, the maritime professional, as we said, and then you create a training program to develop the seafarer on the exact skills that need development. All those are aspects that shows that our industry, it's really engaging with preparing the seafarer for the future. Being positive here, I know the challenges, and I fully agree with the previous panelists that said that the pace we're moving is slow, though. We always forget that yesterday is tomorrow, is today, and all of us were years in the maritime industry, and we're hearing digitalization is tomorrow.
It's already present.
Yeah.
It's already present, yes. And exactly as Domenico talked about the financial applications in technology, and Valentinos spoke about the training and qualifying. Definitely, there is a role for certificates, and definitely we can find a way to get these certificates much more authentic, much more reliable certification. That's why, what do you think about doing a kind of a certification over a blockchain platform to make sure that it's reachable to all the stakeholders and it is totally secured? Because part of the awareness that we need to offer to the young seafarers and even to ourselves first before them is the cybersecurity awareness. Because definitely this is going to be not the future challenge, but this is the present challenge everywhere. So I think this also can be a point. Captain Sudhir, continuing about the technology and the future of the industry. How do you see the impact of the autonomous ship on the future of seafarers training? Even I'm talking about the current seafarers, the existing ones, the new role that they will be getting, and from another perspective, which is preparing the current students, which we have 2 students representing the cadets in the world at the moment. What can we do to them in order to adapt with the future, which is assumed to be autonomous ships?
Yeah, very good question. I think it's a very interesting question. Autonomous ships, in some ways, if you look at DP ships, if you look at dynamic position ships, in some ways they are autonomous ships already. And what is the type of training that they require for a person who's going to be handling the DP systems? It's someone who's monitoring the DP systems, who understands the various GPSs and whatever else they have to maintain that position. So it's an interesting question, because in some ways you could say that a certain degree of autonomy is already available in the market, and training is being given and to seafarers on how to handle those. So you can't just get a person who's done an STCW 95 certificate as a master mariner to go onto a DP ship and operate it. So he needs that extra certification and that extra experience to be able to handle those ships. So I think that is one. So I think training has to be thought through in those lines. Like, what is it actually that we are going to get on these ships? Now, I'll give you another very good example. I transitioned about my own career. I used to sail on cargo ships. I was in cargo ships for 10 years. And then towards the end of my sailing career, I spent about 5 years on cruise ships with the Scandinavian Cruise Line Company, very technologically advanced. And, there were systems on board. We followed a cockpit-style bridge system there, pilot, co-pilot system. And what was very interesting was that, to some extent, autonomy was incorporated into the system. We used to have track pilot, and not only did we have track pilot, we could actually set a course, say, for example, in the channel in Belize or in Bermuda, where our ships used to ply. We could actually set the course, and we could actually have the machine execute the course. So it would actually alter course itself. Now, we never used it within these channels, because we wanted the control ourselves. But we did test these systems when we were at sea, just to see whether it worked, and it did work. So what was the role that I had then was, especially when you were testing these systems, was essentially trying to be there. It's almost autonomous. It's getting you to, on almost an autonomous journey. But you are kind of monitoring the progress, and you're always looking at the vessel and where she's moving. So, I mean, it's very interesting. While we bring ourselves up with autonomy, I think we have to be completely realizing the value of situational awareness. That must not be forgotten. And I think any training, any course that we do in the future for autonomous shipping and for ships which are essentially able to drive or navigate themselves, we would need to always have the skills that a navigator has, those skills which are not really, it's almost an art, it's almost understanding the sea, understanding what shipping is, how your ship behaves. It can't be just a science, it has to be the art which needs to be retained. So I think when we train the next generation of seafarers into these types of vessels, we mustn't forget all that we've got, so far, which has brought us to this point, which is, good situational awareness, a good understanding of your vessel.
Okay, so what you're talking about is maintaining the same old-fashioned or the traditional one, which is like a seamanship, navigation, things like that, just to be in case, to be ready. And we can compromise topics related to stability, the ship construction, this thing, but we have to maintain the core art of navigation within our curriculum, which is navigation, seamanship. That's what I understood.
To an extent, I think we are going towards an area, if you look at today, you have already ships which are plying in the sea. For example, I think there's a ship in the Norwegian fjords, which is Yara's ship, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
She's doing autonomous voyages. Essentially, she's got no people on board. So that is the reality of the times, but that's one, yeah. To be able to get autonomous vessels at sea, you would need to be firstly on an even playing field. How would that work with an autonomous vessel if you were in the South China Sea, for example, with all thousands of fishing vessels there?
I sailed in Taiwan Strait, so I know exactly how it looks like.
Yes. I think all of us seafarers have experienced the heart, pumping very hard when we see that. So I think what I'm trying to say here is that we must retain what knowledge we have. We must not lose that knowledge to get something new. I think the education that comes henceforth should always hold on and remember what it is that we learned. You know, I mean, the soft skills, the art of navigation, and I think that should not be forgotten. That's actually the point I'm trying to make here.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Yeah, exactly. Dr. Konstantinos, how do you think about the maritime industry and its attractiveness toward young men and women? Men and women. So we have to consider the women in your comment, please.
I think I would just like to reiterate what Despina said in the previous panel. I think we are losing out a lot by not incorporating women in our horizon and our portfolio of potential solutions to the crew shortage problem. I think women have a lot to offer, and to be honest with you, we have all this discussion about those technological development, technological advances, digitalization advances, and the question should be, are men any better in that? If the ship of the future is going to be digitalized indeed and technologically advanced indeed, and much of the manual work that has traditionally been performed on board is not the case anymore because such types of activity have been replaced by technology or automation, then why men are inherently better than women? They are not. None is better. None is inherently better. And it's down to the individual and his or her skills to demonstrate performance and competence on board. So by moving women out of the equation, the potential sources that we have to provide solutions to the problem of crew shortage, what we're doing is essentially moving out half of the available solution that lies out there. And for me, this is simply naive, and especially if those digitalization advances and automation advances take place even faster than we expect, which if you ask me, yes, I think they are coming faster than we expect, then obviously women have a central role to play on board. And I don't think that the crew shortage question is going to be part of the question of such a panel in the next Posidonia. I don't think we need to discuss the crew shortage problem again. I was born into the industry because of my family background, and I have heard the crew shortage problem very often in my life during the course of my lifetime. And to be honest, I'm fed up with it. But I think if we put women into the picture, there is no such problem. It's an artificial, it's a contrived problem, essentially.
So do you think that women are attracted to our industry? You know, in the Arab Academy in Sharjah, in UAE, I was really shocked that 34% of the students are females. 34%. Do you think that the future will be that way? Are we expecting to have like a 50-50 on board the vessel someday? Or are we counting on the technology so things will be much more easier for females to operate vessels while they're on shore? Do you think it can be done like maintaining the normal distribution curve which exists anywhere in the world on board the vessel? Because usually it's normal distribution, the bell-shaped one. So it should be expected everywhere. But on board the vessels, or regardless of the vessels, even in the shipping industry, it's still a male-dominated industry. Do you think that it will be able to have the bell shape someday in the near future?
Are you asking me?
If you don't mind,
Youssef?
yeah.
Sorry.
What do you think? Yeah.
Yes, I think we should. If you ask me whether we can, I would say no, because we are not prepared for that. And by we, I mean operators, shipping companies are not prepared for that. But if you ask me, I think we should. And I think the maturity has already been built up among many sub-communities within shipping. Please allow me to know that because I also have an institutional role in shipping, and being part of an international institutional body in shipping, I can see the wider, community-wide discussions that are taking place. There are many individual ship owners and operators that are reluctant to do it, and they still proceed with their own biases and stereotypes. But at a collective level, what I see is the semantic of such types of discussions. We have fully fledged discussions about this issue openly and honestly. Everybody agrees that this is the way forward. So for me, currently, I don't think we are prepared, but for me, it is a matter of time so that we have this 50-50 bell-shaped distribution that we are talking about.
Exactly. I can see here the feedback regarding our question on Slido. Do we need to rebrand the maritime industry to attract young men and women? I can see 56% all the respondents are agreeing that we need that. So if any of the gentlemen would like to comment, feel free.
Captain, if I may, just a point of clarification. I believe the statistic was that 34% of people in the marine community are female. I think the number of female seafarers is closer to 1.2% rather than 34. I find it really interesting that within the maritime community we're talking about ways in which we can promote the industry to women. If we look at other industries, right now they're looking at ways in which they can promote the industry to all members of the LGBTQ community. We are probably a generation behind the curve in terms of equality, in my opinion.
I totally agree with that. Let me get back to Peter, please. After the discussions that you have observed and after our inputs regarding training, modification, do you think that we need to add any extra medical examinations in the MLC convention? Do you think that we need to put amendments or modifications for the STCW or for the training requirements for the seafarers?
Yeah, as I said
to
earlier,
add like soft skills, to add like things.
As I said earlier, I think there's various areas that could be looked at, but probably it goes beyond the scope of this panel. Yes, in order to protect the seafarers, also create more comfort level, and I think the comfort level is something that we should discuss. We spoke a lot about attracting people to the seafarer profession, men and women, of course, and we should also look at retention, and we should take note that the so-called new type of seafarers are a different breed altogether, you know. So probably this lady and gentleman would have in average 3 digital tools with them on board, you know, and would be perfectly able to handle them. So from our Thome ship management perspective, we're trying to make much better use of these good opportunities and involve them more in planning and in execution of responsible jobs. For the longest time, we've always had the general qualification of seafarers is going down, but I think the reason was that we didn't challenge them and didn't give them the right tools on hand. So if we talk about retention, there's a couple of elements that are completely important. The first one will always be, we operate tankers mostly, it's safety, right? So it is a fact that a job at sea is 20 times more dangerous than a job on shore. A job at sea is still 5 times more dangerous than working in the construction industry. So it is our obligation to do everything in terms of training and also PPE and what have you, to make people feel safe. That will probably also attract them to the job, right? The other important parts are how do you emotionally engage people to be conscious of the environment, be proud to be a seafarer. So just, and I think that can only be the addition of small steps. Just to give one example, we just have published today that we have joined an initiative called IC, which is a non-for-profit organization that geomaps floating plastic garbage in the seas, right? And that is something where we ask our 7,000 seafarers to download this app onto their mobile phones, and whenever they see something that threatens their living environment, you know, then they can geomap this, and from a scientific basis we can coordinate collection of this garbage or evaluate where the garbage comes from. So I think these kind of things where you create more attention may help going forward. The other element, of course, is how to keep them well fed and healthy. There's a lot of apps and initiatives, but the most simple things is how to feed people properly and healthy. That has never been a focus. So we're running a catering operation, so it's an everyday affair. But there's a lot of embarrassing things happening around this. For example, everybody is aware of the inflationary situation around the world, and probably in average, food costs have gone up 10 to 15%. Yeah. But try to talk to a ship owner and say that he has to now increase the feeding budget by 10 to 15%. I guarantee you 2 out of 5 will say no, which automatically will result in underfeeding or less quality. You know, that's something that I find completely unacceptable. Shouldn't even be a matter of discussion. So I'm just mentioning a few examples where we can turn some screws, and it's not one big jump, it's small little steps, I would say, which will increase the appeal of joining us on this journey. And also maybe one more word with regards to what comes along with this new generation. It is also how L&D is being designed. I do not know, there's so many mandatory trainings. I don't know whether you have done many of them. Most of them are utterly boring, only because it's mandatory, people do them. And of course, even for a dinosaur like me, I enjoy having a training on a gamified version, right? Where my attention span is there. I'm not yet on TikTok level, so I still respond to more than 10 seconds. But you cannot have a 1-hour training with a multiple choice and then assume that there's a retention of knowledge that is considerable, right? So I think these are all areas where we can, as an industry, just say, we have to do something. You know, it is not as it was, it will never be again.
Fully agreeing with Peter.
Exactly.
Just to add that today we have the tools, we have the means to get this information, study this information, and see the impact that the training has. Find out a way to get all this information about if they're happy, about their well-being, if they're being fed properly. Yeah. The means to get this data are there now.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Please, Captain, go ahead.
No, I was just going to add in, with regards to your original question about, enhanced pre-employment medical examinations.
Yes.
That is something that I'm now speaking with my Standard Club P&I hat on. That is something that we encourage our members to for the well-being of the seafarers on board the ships, that before they join, often the requirements of STCW 95 are quite basic when it comes to the ENG1 and all the certification that is required for being on board a vessel. But we as P&I clubs, we see some of the largest claims that we get are because of seafarers falling ill on board or slips, trips and falls. But that's another matter. But what I mean is it's to do with medical conditions, and we encourage our members to have these pre-employment medical examinations of seafarers, where certain diseases that wouldn't have been picked up, perhaps like diabetes or something like that, is found out before the person joins the ship. He can, then we can then take corrective action and perhaps have insulin on board or something on board so that he or she can stay on board the vessel, or they can get that time to recuperate before they can go back to sea. So yes, so that is something we encourage our members to follow those kind of schemes. Yeah, so I just thought I'd add in here.
Yes, and I can see many questions from my position. I think
Captain
it's a
Youssef,
bit
can I
hard.
just add something about
Please.
that? I think when we are talking about the well-being of seafarers, we need to move beyond the seafarer himself or herself per se as well, and try to see what's going on with his or her family as well. And I'm saying that because we place a lot of emphasis on seafarers' well-being, but we need to understand that this well-being is inextricably intertwined with the well-being of his or her family as well. And I'm saying that because, for example, right now we are utilizing Domenico services. Domenico, thank you very much. Okay. He and his team are doing an excellent job providing digital financial solutions to my company, and I'm grateful to Domenico and his team for that. But what we realized as part of this process is that, for example, we need to develop a requisite competence in seafarers' families as well, on what this system means, what those digital solutions mean for the extended family of the seafarer. And that's why, for example, we are trying to develop financial literacy seminars for seafarers and their families as well. So when it comes to seafarers' well-being, focusing on the seafarers only is a partial a view of the whole picture that we need to have into consideration. Just a small comment to add to what has been rightly said.
Securing the seafarer and securing his family and putting him under the minimum stress that we can. Yes, I can see many questions here, and it's very hard. Okay, I'll move to some of the questions by time, because it's a bit hard to read the question from here or from there.
It's a bit hard.
It's a bit challenging for me. I'll manage. David, please. According to the discussions and the brainstorming that we have been doing for the past hour, how do you see the career development path in the maritime industry within the current and the future perspectives? Because at the end of the day, whoever will get on board the maritime industry, he has to see a clear career path for him.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that the panelists have been talking about over the last week or so is whether we should refer to people at sea as seafarers or as marine professionals. If we refer to people as seafarers, that limits the longevity of their career. They cease being a seafarer when they come ashore. Whereas if we talk about people as marine professionals, then their time at sea is just part of a much larger, much more rewarding career. Not just rewarding for them, but also rewarding for us as an industry. I think we need to be understanding that what attracts people to a particular profession, a particular role, or indeed a particular company is not actually about remuneration now. It's about ethics of that organization, how well it fits with the individual's own ethics. It's about the lifestyle that that offers, both the advantages and disadvantages of travel, and the career opportunities within it. And then only in a third place tends to come remuneration. If we can demonstrate to people entering and within the industry that we care about their career progression, that we acknowledge that they may not remain at sea for their entire working life, that there are options to them that will retain them either in our companies or certainly within our industry, then we will attract better quality people to our industry and retain them better.
Yeah, I agree with that, of course. And as one of the questions that I've seen now, some was asking, is it a short-term job for a seafarer being on board a ship? I think this is most commonly. I'm a former captain. I've been on board vessels, oil tankers, bulk carriers, cruise ships as well, and then I moved ashore. And this should be the expectations to make sure that we will attract the caliber that we are intending to. That's why we have to prepare them, to qualify them, to train them, to certify them with the required certifications and concentrations that will support their future onshore certifications, maybe through the bachelor degrees or maybe through some specialized diplomas or postgraduate diplomas. So this is almost a draw. Seafarers and maritime professionals, so I think 50% supports the term seafarer, which has been existing since I joined this career. And the maritime professional, the thing that crossed my mind to propose, maybe it will push us towards new branding for our career, for our industry, and might attract that kind of caliber that we are aiming to. So please, if you'd like to comment, any of the gentlemen, feel free about this.
Maybe just a quick one regarding the maritime professional. Of course, we have a focus at the moment for life living at sea, but we have to run companies, right? And also what we do as companies within the digitalization requires a completely different skill set. Yeah? Not only our board electrician all of a sudden has to be a network professional to set up a server and things like that, which is something that is not reflected very well in how we educate our people, but also the people on shore, you know. Who would have thought 5 years ago that we have to attract data scientists to set up our Power BI dashboards in order to be able to manage the vessels and keep them safe. So the other question on how do we get people on board, how do we get people into our companies, young people with IT savviness, I think we do not have any sexy approach there as well. And there has to be a fair mix, I would say. And as you said, culture is probably the key here, where in the past this culture was a family feeling where the owner of the company would call his captain almost every day and would exactly know where the wife would live and what the kids were doing. But I think in some way we have to maintain the personal approach to things in so many ways that we are, even though we know we have to go into the technological specification as well.
Exactly.
It's a people business still.
Please.
Captain, I love the term maritime professional. We discussed it last week, and I'm grateful because it has never been into my horizon, so I love the term. But I think at the same time, this has to be done under a certain caveat. We cannot lose sight of the seafarer. We cannot undermine the term seafarer itself. I see, for example, Captain Fragias here in front of me. He's an ex-mariner and a maritime professional later on in his career. But personally, my company and personally myself have learned a lot from him and his accumulated wisdom, his practical wisdom, both as a seafarer and a maritime professional. And he has made my company a better company through this expertise. And all similar people like me. I'm not a master mariner myself, so I have learned a lot from those master mariners. And without them, without the seafaring skill itself, the essential seafaring skill in the traditional sense of it, I think we have to lose out a lot. Yeah. At the same time, of course, there are huge opportunities for a maritime professional. Posidonia itself, the exhibition, is a testament to that. There are so many companies here that have nothing to do with master mariners. They have to do with technologies, finance people, engineers. So I think a combination is the best way forward.
And, if I could add in over here, I mean, definitely from my perspective, I'm being an seafarer. Now I would call myself a maritime professional. But I would agree that one of the things that limited, I mean, what I was a little bit worried about when I went out to sea when I was 18 is that, is this going to be it for me? Was this like going to be a glass ceiling for me? I'll become a captain, I'll stay a captain, and will I be a captain on ships forever? And that was a sort of a driving force for me to want to come and try doing other things, because I wanted to see my life as not just a person who works on a ship, but someone who could add value in other circumstances related to shipping ashore. And I think that is something, I think, from a rebranding perspective, would be really, really useful, so that people feel that this is a way and a path which makes you, get all that experience at a young age, and then move on with your career to do great things later on.
Exactly. We are trying to avoid to put ceiling for an ambitious person.
Yes.
Because putting a ceiling for an ambitious person, that means that we will get the wrong persons always. That's it. Please.
And we cannot give the new generation the idea that there is a clear path, because the vastness of opportunities, this is what they need to understand, that there is a huge amount of opportunities that they can go to.
Yes. And I think it takes three to do this role: the governments, the industry, and the education. And each single, okay, Emma, I got the message. And each single one of these components, it has a crucial role to make sure that the message has been delivered and the candidates are aware about the career in the shipping. And I think there is an awareness. I think this is the umbrella. This is the umbrella under which we have to work, like an industry, like education, like awareness, to make sure that we are delivering the message to the young generation. This is your career at sea. This is your career at the industry. Someday you'll be that or that or that. It's not only limited to shipboard operations. You have no ceiling, and the sky is not even the limit. It's even beyond that. I think that we have a couple of questions. If you would like to add any of your input regarding any of these questions, because I think we're almost reached our
Paul Jolly about the role of mentoring. There's a rule of thumb that we invest 70% of our time and effort and money in formal training intervention, 20% of our time and money in informal but still regulated and documented interventions such as mentoring and coaching, and 10% of our time into ad hoc and unplanned learning, such as discussions, problem solving, and so on. And yet the learning that our people take away and use is the other way around. And that in fact the majority of the knowledge, skills and behaviors they use on a day-to-day basis comes from those very, very informal, undocumented and unplanned ways in which people learn. Yeah. I think that there is a huge opportunity for mentoring and coaching on board ship, especially now with the new connectivity and interactivity that we've got at our fingertips. There is no reason why we can't have regular mentoring sessions one-to-one between two people on different ships, somebody on shore, somebody on ship, and support people in their long-term development as well as their short-term coaching needs to become better at what they're doing now and critically better at what they're going to do for us in the future.
Exactly, David. And now you grabbed my attention to, I think there's a kind of a gap between the stakeholders in the maritime industry, the industry, academia, and the government. What you're talking about is exactly perfect. I totally agree with that. From my perspective, like a university perspective, we are working on that. We are working on developing a kind of a personalized learn by doing for the onboard training, something that adapts with the individual's learning style in order to deliver the information on board the vessel and to maintain the continuous training for him. So that's very good. So I think more meetings has to be conducted in order to exactly to fill this gap, because it seems that we are working in the same direction and you're thinking of the same direction. So I think everybody here talks the same language, and I'm really happy with the discussions and in the presence of the audience. And I'd like to hear, just if you don't mind, one last comment about to wrap up the whole discussion in brief.
Myself?
Yeah.
As you know, the word digitization that is everywhere now in the financial service industry started many, many years ago, because you want to have everything digital as much as possible. You have banks popping up like mushroom everywhere. You have a website, you have a self-onboarding registration, and that's the way you want. I've been talking to, in the last 10 years, to ship operators, ship managers, manning agency, and trying to understand the shipping industry, because everybody says it's very conservative. That's not the case. It's because digitizing the shipping industry when it comes to salaries, for example, it's not an easy task, because it's a global industry. It's not focused on a few countries. People go everywhere. And you need to make sure that any solution you provide in terms of digitalization works everywhere. So one of the questions that I get asked all the time is, can we go fully cashless? Can a ship be without cash? I wish this could be possible. My answer is, you can do this 90% probably, and it's a big improvement. But expecting full digitalization in salaries, for example, in the shipping industry, 100% is a little bit complicated. And at least it's not going to happen for the next 5-6 years. But we are heading there. So there are some peculiarities that need to be considered in our industry, which are different from, for us working onshore, for example, which is much easier for us.
Thank you. Thank you, Domenico. Valentinos, would you like to add any comments?
I want to add
for the session.
Take the perspective of Domenico, but on the competence side of things.
Right.
It's a global industry, which means digitalization was here, is here, and will be here, but different areas of the world will go in a different pace. We will see, even though I mentioned training methods before, new training methods before, if we take it on a global scale, all training methods today are vital in order to bring the seafarer to the next level. And all this organically will bring seafaring to the future.
Yeah.
Captain Sudhir, would you like to?
Yeah, my final statement would be that the world supply chain is run by, trade. Ships are manned by seafarers. The seafarers are key workers. They are part of that which we take for granted. Everything that we have today in this room perhaps has come on a ship at some time, and someone was there to get that voyage, and we sometimes don't see that. I think we as managers sitting ashore, we should be empathetic. We should understand that there is a human being involved here. Digitalization is coming in, as you say. There is going to be changes which are going to happen. And, technology comes, it's unstoppable, and we must embrace it. It's not trying to replace a human. But we must always remember where we came from and how we've reached where we've reached. So I think we should always bear that in mind. I mean, I'll give a good example. When, for example, ECDIS first came out, the number of groundings that ships had actually increased statistically. And that was because there was a false sense of situational awareness, of security, because you saw on the digital map a shallow, marked on the digital map, and it gave the seafarer the sense of security that he can come closer, whereas a traditional seafarer would have stayed further away. So what I'm trying to say is that we have to consider, the human element as we embrace technology, as we train. Not only do we change how the courses are structured, we even need to train the trainer, who's involved with getting that imparting that training to the next generation. So yes, my closing statement would be pretty much that key workers, seafarers, and also this is, well, I use the word seafarers, they are maritime professionals.
Yes,
and
sure.
there is no limit, and that's what would attract the next generation.
Dr. Konstantinos, would you like to add a
Yes,
comment?
I will try to be brief. One of the main reasons that people attend Posidonia is to go to the parties afterwards, so I will try to be brief because people will hate us at the end. I think one of the major things that I would like to point out is that all those things that we need to train our people on, such as soft skills development, all this discussion and the mything around soft skills development, are a lifelong journey. They are not a snapshot. Okay? So I think what we need to do, in addition to what we already do, is to make an extra effort to incorporate all those developments into the curriculum of the academies. Because if we rely later on to instill such a culture, an ethic of care, and a cognitive flexibility as a skill in seafarer's psyche, it may be too late. I think we need to do much more in terms of incorporating that into the curriculum of maritime academies when people are fresh, and they are ready to absorb all this meaningful information at an age that will allow them to instill that as a culture, a personal culture, and part of their own personal mindset.
Peter?
Well, closing statement, now that we're escaping the ghost of COVID, I think we should think about this old sentence, never let a good crisis go to waste. We have to really now sit and reflect what are our learnings, our true takeaways, what are we changing after this in recognition and preparation for the next event to come. And I would still say that we have to really, as an industry, put our shoulders together, our heads together. We must stop patting our shoulders and not permit the governments to pat their shoulders that they've handled this very well looking back. No, this was not the case. And still until today, crew changes are horrible. And when we look at that situation, I would say that could be the single biggest hindrance to attract talent. So probably we should start right there.
Peter, would you like to add a comment?
Thank you. The previous panel discussion touched on crew shortage, and the title of this session is Better Life at Sea, and the two are inextricably linked. We should recognise that we are in competition to attract and retain the best talent, the best fit for our organisations. Part of that attraction package now will most definitely be how we champion our ethics and our environmental aspirations, the emotional support, the soft skills support, the career development that we give our staff, their welfare both on board and off the ship, diet, opportunities to learn new skills, and the holistic long and short-term welfare that we can support them with. All of this adds up to a better life at sea.
Finally, I would like to thank you all for your discussions and enriching the debates. And thanks to Sea Trade and to the Global Maritime Club for raising such issues, which is related to the human element and how to take care of it in the present and in the future. Thank you.